one chance, Jake.
How will I know if he chooses me?
He will try to kill you.
Outstanding.
How often do you hear about films getting greenlit for not one, not two, but 4 sequels at once? For the average filmmaker, that's the deal of a lifetime. But for James Cameron, well, that's just a normal Thursday. And precisely what happens when you make a gargantuan film like Avatar that grosses a whopping $2.9 billion at the box office. When you pump out a movie that sets the record for the highest grossing film of all time and holds that record for nearly a decade, studios are just about begging you to make more of them, hence why Avatar is slated to get 4 sequels over the course of the next few years. Hailed as a technical masterpiece, Avatar wowed moviegoers back in 2009, and the lush special effects and immersive settings still holds up over a decade later. The film stars Sam Worthington, Zoe Saldana, Michelle Rodriguez, Stephen Lang, and the wonderful Sigourney Weaver. And in case you've been living under a rock, it tells the epic tale of Pandora, a moon that humans are looking to colonize and mine for a mineral called unobtainium. Earth's resources have been completely depleted, and wouldn't you know it, the planet is becoming inhospitable, so humans see Pandora as their last hope. Unfortunately for us, the planet's inhabited by big blue humanoid aliens called the Na'vi, who don't exactly love the idea of humans coming in and ruining their planet. Because of the conflict that arose from this, humans have created a system that will neurologically connect people's brains with a Na'vi-human hybrid, and these artificial bodies are called avatars. Our hero, Jake Sully, a paraplegic ex-marine, gets integrated with an avatar body in order to spy on the Na'vi and help advance the colonization of the planet. But over the course of the film, Jake winds up falling in love with a Na'vi named Neytiri, which complicates his mission and forces him to have to pick a side. While this romance is the core of the film, some of the overarching themes in Avatar include the journey of self-discovery, environmentalism, imperialism, and the mistreatment of indigenous communities. I love Avatar. I'm well aware of its flaws, but the world of Pandora was way too breathtaking to resist. I've been a huge fan of James Cameron since an 8-year-old me stumbled upon Terminator 2 Judgment Day. I hadn't seen the first Terminator film, thankfully, as the cyber thriller horror would have undoubtedly scarred me, but I was drawn to the high-stakes, bombastic visual splendor that a time travel, robot uprising, save-the-world narrative under the helm of an accomplished filmmaker could offer. Over time, I would experience his entire filmography, including his underwater documentaries, and what was evident to me was that Cameron was as much an explorer as he was a filmmaker. This curiosity would pave the way for him and his team to find ingenious ways of marrying the two fields together, inspiring them to pioneer advancements in robotics to facilitate deep-sea exploration, and advancements in technology to bring Cameron's imagination to life on the screen. So, when I heard that Avatar was coming out, a film that he'd been working on for 10 years, that implemented new technologies and was inspired by his fascination of underwater flora and fauna, which Cameron described as being aliens at our doorstep, I flocked to the theatre to watch it in both 3D and 2D and was mesmerized. Sure, there are some issues with the characters and pacing of the film, a topic for another day, and something that is more or less rectified with the extended cut edition. Seriously, I recommend you check it out as it gives our central characters more depth. But I was still captivated by the photorealistic beauty of this new world, and like Jake Sully in the film, I had to go back a number of times.
Last time you took a shower.
I don't need a shower.
Jesus, Marie.
If you'll indulge me, I'd love to explore this film in full detail, in what will likely be the longest video I've ever made, beginning at its start as a concept for a short film in the 70s, to an 80-page treatment written by Cameron in 1994, going through its story and characters, its entire production process, the inspiration for the setting, the movie's implementation of new filmmaking technology, its release and public reception, all the way up to a discussion on the sequels, which are just around the corner. Development for Avatar began all the way back in 1994, when Cameron wrote an 80-page treatment for the film. Originally, the movie was set to start filming after 1997's Titanic wrapped, with a release date slated for 1999. Obviously, that didn't pan out. Cameron said that a key reason why Avatar was delayed was because computer graphics simply hadn't advanced far enough to achieve his vision. The release of movies like Peter Jackson's King Kong and the Pirates of the Caribbean films during the mid-2000s convinced Cameron that technology had developed enough for him to begin tackling Avatar. Cameron was originally supposed to be working on an adaptation of Yukito Kishihiro's manga Battle Angel Alita during the 2000s, but he opted to work on Avatar instead. He did eventually co-produce the Robert Rodriguez adaptation of Alita in 2019, so it was pretty win-win for Cameron in the end. From 2005 to 2007, Cameron worked with a handful of designers, including famed fantasy illustrator Wayne Barlow and renowned concept artist Jordu Shell, to shape the design of the Na'vi and the world of Pandora with paintings and physical sculptures, which in turn helped inform the narrative. And by 2006, the full script for Avatar was completed. In an interview with Entertainment Weekly the following year, Cameron said his inspiration was every single sci-fi book he read as a kid, as well as the marine life he'd encountered during his diving adventures. During the production process, multiple people tried claiming that Avatar was actually their idea, and that James Cameron had stolen it from them. His company, Lightstorm Entertainment, had multiple lawsuits levied against them from such people. In response, Cameron wrote up a giant 45-page manifesto detailing his process for developing Avatar's story. In it, he explained that he'd been drawing concept art for Avatar as far back as the 11th grade, and cited many of these illustrations for his case. He also talked about a script for a stop-motion film that he wrote back in the 70s called Chrysalis, which featured a wheelchair-bound man who opts for a surgery that will let him roam free within his own mind, similar to how Jake Sully's mind hops into an Avatar body. Needless to say, all those guys lost their lawsuits. The other story that inspired Avatar, Xenogenesis, then became a sci-fi adventure short film that Cameron made in 1978 at the age of 24, and it would go on to inspire many of his later films, most notably Aliens. As mentioned earlier, in addition to these inspirations, the environment of Pandora was modeled around deep-sea creatures that the director had found during his thousands of hours of deep-sea diving after getting his diving license at the age of 15. This love of the ocean is fed into his work on The Abyss and, of course, the Titanic. Due to the dangerous conditions of roaming the sunken vessel, Cameron and his team created robots and unique submersible vehicles that he could operate using special lights and cameras. Despite operating the vehicles from a distance, Cameron commented on the strange feeling he had viewing the monitors, almost as though his consciousness had been transferred to the submersible, something that would also feed into Jake's transformation into a Na'vi within Avatar. Avatar's incredibly detailed production process paid off immensely. Even over a decade later, the visuals look fantastic. There isn't a single effect that feels over 10 years old. Computer animation generally ages like milk, and many other films that utilize burgeoning computer animation at the time don't hold up nearly as well as Avatar. Even Peter Jackson's King Kong has a few moments that feel really aged. The performance capture never once dips into the uncanny valley. The Na'vi designs lend themselves to emotional performances really well. Even with the increasing popularity of motion capture in film and video games, it's still rare to see it pulled off this well, and with this much consideration of how emotions will be digitally conveyed. One detail in particular that really elevates the realism is the fact that the ears of the Na'vi move when they're threatened or happy. It's a small detail, but it adds so much to the performance. The tail operates in a similar way by adding an extra element of expression to the creatures. It even provides some amusing character moments, like Jake accidentally slapping a nurse with his new tail when he's still getting used to his Avatar form. The art team really succeeded in making Pandora feel real. The scenes where Jake is surrounded by floating jellyfish creatures are genuinely breathtaking. The bioluminescent plants are also amazing, and they ride the line of fantastical and believable perfectly. Pandora itself is as much of a character as anyone else. It's no wonder that Disney created a whole theme park around it. Despite the heaps of praise for the visuals, Avatar does have a few weak spots in the script. Many of the characters here are nothing more than stock characters. You've got your hardcore jerk of a commander in the form of Colonel Miles.
Venezuela, that was some mean bush. Nothing like this here, though.
The sleazy corporate guy in Parker.
This is why we're here. Unobtainium. Because this little gray rock sells for 20 million a kilo. That's the only reason.
The jealous nerd with Norm.
The legendary floating mountains of Pandora? Heard of them?
Many of the humans in particular don't have much of a substantial development at all. Norm's character is utterly unmemorable and unnecessary. He's there to be jealous of Jake and provide some exposition, but that's about it. And speaking of utterly unmemorable, I dare you to name a single detail about Michelle Rodriguez's flight captain, Trudy. They could not have underutilized the actress more. Still, the star-crossed romance of Jake and Neytiri more than makes up for the sometimes flat characters. The chemistry between Sam Worthington and Zoe Saldana is fantastic, and again, it's a testament to the visual effects that their romance can still feel real. Their love feels truly epic, but that's to be expected since Cameron also crafted the incredible romance between Jack and Rose in Titanic. One of the most powerful scenes in the film is when Neytiri happens upon Jake's human body, and the two see each other as their true selves. Their romance transcends the physical vessels of their body, and it's truly beautiful to see. Another scene that puts a huge smile on my face is when Sam enters his avatar body for the first time. Having lost the ability to walk, he jolts out of the lab and enjoys his first run in years, with James Horner's uplifting musical variation for the theme song I See You blaring in the background, further adding to the sense of wonderment that Pandora would solicit in both Jake and the audience. Story-wise, Avatar can be a bit heavy-handed at times. Essentially, Avatar is Disney's Pocahontas, but with blue aliens. An outsider shows up, woos the indigenous woman, and then fights off his own people to save her. The relationship between the Na'vi and the humans directly parallels that of colonizers and Native Americans and Africans. The Colonel and Parker call the Na'vi savages. They talk about how they set up schools to force them to learn English, and make various other allusions to attempts at assimilation. It aims to illustrate how corporations selfishly bulldoze indigenous populations for money, but it shows this by having Parker say things like,
"Killing the indigenous looks bad, but there's one thing that shareholders hate more than bad press, and that's a bad quarterly statement."
That is just a little too on the nose, and it would have been nice if the film just let the actions of the miners and corporate entities speak for themselves. Having said that, there are some great moments with the Na'vi stating that it was them that tried to teach humans.
We have tried to teach other sky people. It is hard to fill a cup which is already full.
Though a few critics did pan the aforementioned aspects of the script, the world building is more than grand enough to make up for any storytelling missteps. The richness of the setting's lore not only adds depth to Pandora itself, but it gives more nuance to the film's environmental themes. The parallels with Greek beliefs regarding Gaia and the personification of nature are handled more delicately than the occasionally clunky anti-colonial themes. The Na'vi essentially believe that everything in nature is sacred, and their worship of Awa and the significance of the home tree is a genuinely interesting element that suggests there is an even larger world beyond the surface. The story incorporates a range of religious motifs that really flesh out the culture of Pandora's inhabitants, and it will be exciting to see how much the sequels further explore these concepts. Cameron also incorporated elements of Hinduism to the Na'vi designs by giving them blue skin and markings similar to that of Krishna. The entire concept of an avatar likely stems from beliefs about reincarnation. Jake is rewarded for his strong heart and his physical sacrifices by receiving a sturdy Na'vi body that is stronger than his human body ever was. The spirituality throughout the film has provided a rich canvas for academics, as there have been multiple articles and papers released since 2009 that examine the theology of Avatar. The sound design and soundtrack are spectacular, and they really help this sci-fi epic feel, well, epic. The late visionary master composer, James Horner, who also provided soundtracks for Alien and Titanic, composed the score. Even the soundtrack does a great deal to flesh out the Na'vi culture. Horner worked with ethnomusicologist Wanda Bryant to create music that felt distinct and representative of the alien race. The instrumentation creates a thoroughly captivating and exotic feel that complements the film incredibly well. Avatar certainly succeeds in being immersive. Despite being nearly 3 hours long, it has enough action and gorgeousness to captivate audiences throughout the entire runtime. The pacing is consistent, and even the film's more subdued moments feel big. Even if you're not a huge Avatar fan, the movie is enchanting enough that even haters have to admit that, yeah, this thing deserved to make billions of dollars. Okay, now that we're more familiar with the film, let's dive into the insane amount of hard work that went into making it a reality. One of the main appeals of Avatar was the way the film created an entirely new world seemingly from scratch. Pandora was rich and striking, and the world felt alien and awesome, while also feeling distinctively real and believable. To achieve this, the art department was split into two different sections according to concept artist James Klein. One was dedicated to the flora and fauna of Pandora, while the other was focused on the more human aspects of the story. Cameron and co-producer John Landau enlisted the help of botanists from UC Riverside to create believable lab sets for the film. Chairwoman of the Botany and Plant Sciences Department, Jodie Holt, not only assisted the set designer, but she also consulted with Sigourney Weaver on how to play her botanist character, Dr. Grace Augustine. When it came to the designs of the Na'vi themselves, creature designer Wayne Barlow was working with Cameron on the alien designs as early as 1996. Neville Page, who worked on the design of the Cloverfield monster, was also a part of the Avatar design team. Page actually worked on Avatar for around 3 years, which is much longer than a designer normally works on a single film project. These designs were then brought to life by the Shell Sculpture Studio, led by Jordu Shell. These sculptures gave the 3D painting team a more realistic reference point, which ultimately helped them achieve an overall more organic look for the Na'vi. As for the language of the Na'vi, USC linguistics professor Paul Fromer created a language consisting of about 1,000 words for the film. Cameron actually approached him with about 30 or so words written out already, and then Fromer built on it from there. The language has elements of Maori, Polynesian, and African dialects. And when it came to the dialect, Zoe had the most difficult role in this department as she spoke the most Na'vi in the film. And so an executive decision was made to model the dialect and speech of every other character around her, which meant that she had to carry the weight of showcasing the new language to both the audience and the other actors on her shoulders. A lot of work had also gone into the choreography and movement of the film. In order to distinguish the physical characteristics and movement of the Na'vi to that of humans, the actors underwent a strict and precise movement training course under the supervision of Terry Notary. This was then complemented with archery, horse riding, and dialect work for the Na'vi cast, while Sam was forced to endure further military training with former Marines, most notably James's brother John. And to ensure that Michelle Rodriguez looked believable as a helicopter pilot, well, James got his friend Kevin LaRosa, a pilot who had taught him, to teach her how to actually fly. Now, Avatar was not the first film to ever use motion capture technology or CGI, but it was one of the first to utilize these technologies on such a large scale. Weta Digital, which was originally founded by Peter Jackson for his film Heavenly Creatures, worked on the majority of the digital effects for Avatar. Cameron described the film as a true hybrid, a full live-action shoot with CG characters and CG in live environments. It's estimated that about 60% of the film is CGI imagery, and roughly 25% of the movie was filmed traditionally using non-mocapped actors on a live set. The stage that they used for the 3D shoots was referred to as the volume, and it was 6 times the size of previous mocap stages. Actors wore motion capture suits with 56 reflective markers, and each day they would have to stand in a T-pose and get full body scans. Then those on the visual effects team would digitally assign numerical identifiers to each marker on their body so that their mocap software could properly track them. Because the bulk of the movie was being shot in a grey soundstage, Cameron flew the cast and crew over to Hawaii and shot some of the scenes with the actors in costume on location, purely as a dummy run. And when they all returned to the studio to begin shooting, the wild jungle environment they'd experienced, now ingrained in their memory, fed into their ability to act as though they were surrounded by exotic plant life and animals. For the shoot, the crew used the Fusion camera system, which was developed by Cameron and film producer Vince Pace as a way to shoot in stereoscopic 3D. For this ambitious film, virtual production supervisor Glenn Derry modified the 3D camera to create an augmented reality during shooting. This was referred to as a swing camera. The camera would sense its position on a motion capture stage and then generate a 2-scale, low-res version of Pandora around the actors. Cameron likened the swing camera to a big, powerful game engine. If I want to fly through space or change my perspective, I can. I can turn the whole scene into a living miniature and go through it on a 50:1 scale. Certain plants and objects would get a physical prop stand-in for actors to interact with so as to get a more authentic performance. Then, software called Motion Builder would create and stream real-time 3D animated placeholders. This essentially meant that the actors were able to shoot a scene, walk over to a nearby booth, and review their performance in 3D immediately, which is just incredible. The systems were processing so much information that the untested software was pushed to the extremes, and the expansive hardware, which was fully taxed, would all shut down a number of times each day. For an actor, shooting scenes with mocap is a way different experience than traditional film shoots. For one, actors don't really know what the camera angle will actually be once their scene gets edited into the movie. Mocap records 360-degree views of actors, so their performance needs to sell from every direction. Sigourney Weaver didn't mind though. She found the process to be freeing and more akin to stage acting. "It's simpler," she said. "You just act, it's just you and the material." Cameron also stated that it was easier to work with actors this way, since you didn't have to break up their performances by changing camera or lighting setups. An additional camera and rig was set up on the mocap suits that tracked facial movements. This facial performance capture rig consists of a small cap fitted specifically to each actor's head, with a tiny camera fixed to the front. This way, every subtle twitch, wrinkle, and snarl could be captured and referenced later. Mocap producer James Knight said that most cameras would still be trained on actors' faces, as opposed to solely shooting 360 wide shots. This was a relatively new way to shoot 3D in mocap, and this entire camera system cost about $14 million, and officially, the entire movie was budgeted at a whopping $237 million. Though they did smooth out some of the camera movements in post, ultimately, the footage came out looking surprisingly organic. It was as if the camera dolly was in the jungle, Knight said. Imagine if you were shooting that in a real jungle, the tracks you'd have, the cranes you'd need, it would be ridiculous. Camera moves like this just aren't possible in the real world. While I understand his sentiment, this wasn't entirely true. I have a pretty detailed video going over the production process of the first Predator movie in 1986, and while it was the very nightmare Knight described, they were able to pull it off rather successfully. Some moviegoers and critics were a little confused about how the motion capture worked. Were the actors really acting, or was it all animated? There were a few who actually feared that the technology in Avatar would make actors obsolete. Obviously, we still have working actors today, so Avatar didn't wipe them all out with its technology, but the question of actor involvement versus animation still looms today. Ultimately, most people assumed it was animation doing the heavy lifting, which was unfortunate because in reality, the performance capture was just digital prosthetics. It didn't dilute or augment the performance of the actors. Because of this, Avatar nabbed major award nominations in just about every category except acting. Now, truth be told, the characters in the movie aren't the most complex, so it's possible that critics felt it wasn't a great script for flexing acting chops. Still, Zoe Saldana in particular did a phenomenal job as Neytiri, but didn't really get her due props because people didn't fully understand the mocap process. James Cameron emphasized the actors' involvement when it came to Avatar, and tried his best to make sure the CGI didn't overshadow their performances. See, he prefers to call it performance capture, not motion capture. He stressed this constantly in interviews, and in a few he actually refers to it as perf cap instead of mocap. It doesn't seem like this term really caught on, but he does make a good point when he said that actors aren't there just to convey movement and motion, they're there to convey emotion and performance. Specifically, he emphasized the importance of capturing facial expressions so as to avoid any dips into the uncanny valley. This was the reason actors had that extra camera attached to their heads to keep any digital animations of Na'vi facial expressions down to a minimum, so as to let the actors' performances shine through. Even with all that said about the emphasis on acting, it still took a team of over 20 animators 9 months to fully animate each character. It's worth mentioning that Weta Digital weren't the only animation studio working on the film, though they did do the bulk of the CGI. 13 other studios worked on various elements of the film, most notably Industrial Light and Magic. Now, DIT workflow usually isn't an aspect of filmmaking that people jump to learn about, but in the case of Avatar, the data management is wildly impressive. Think about it, every digital animation, every bit of footage from multiple cameras, every leaf on Pandora, it all had to be stored somewhere. The movie's ambitious nature meant that it took massive amounts of data to bring the film to life. The entire production generated more than a petabyte of information, that's 1 million gigabytes. In order to maintain this large amount of data, Microsoft created a digital asset management system called Gaia that served as the hub for all the metadata and digital effects for the film. Landau said Gaia was the backbone that everything else ran on top of. The reliance on Microsoft here signified the increasingly expanding role that IT would play in filmmaking. Sure, digital filmmaking and extensive DIT was done before Avatar, of course, but not on the scale of a petabyte. Each minute of Avatar essentially took up around 17 gigabytes of storage. On top of that, the server farm that Weta Digital utilized to render Avatar was 10,000 square feet and utilized 4,000 HP servers. The supercomputer executed 1.4 million tasks a day. Sometimes it took several hours to render a single frame, which is wild when you consider that 24 frames make up a second of film. Believe it or not, quite a few folks expected Avatar to flop. Take this headline from Slate for example. Here come the cats with human boobs. Is Avatar destined to flop? Little did they know that a mere decade later, there would be an actual CGI flop about cats with human boobs, which I've covered in the past. The article included a few concerns from online film fans who worried that the CGI would be too much, or that the Na'vi would end up being as obnoxiously ugly on screen as Jar Jar Binks. New York Times even made a prediction that 20th Century Fox's Alvin and the Chipmunks, The Squeakquel, would have to cover the financial losses when it opened a week after Avatar. Adding even more pressure was the fact that the trailer for the film was met with laughter and criticism, with many critics and audiences even going so far as to humiliate and poke fun of some of the actors during their press tours for other projects. To counter this negativity, Cameron and Landau organised for 15 minutes of the film to be shown to people around the world for free in 3D. This was met with such buzz that they proceeded to contact hundreds of theatres around the world and help them configure their 3D systems so that the film could be enjoyed in all its 3D beauty. Well, as I'm sure you already know, Avatar was anything but a flop. It became the highest grossing movie of all time in a mere 41 days, and it wasn't unseated until July of 2019 when Avengers Endgame took the throne, a film which benefited from 20 previous films within its interconnected film universe. Box office analysts attribute the aggressive marketing, repeat viewings from people wishing to see the movie in both 2D and 3D, and a relative lack of competition to Avatar's resounding success. Avatar's theatrical release was moved from Memorial Day to December of 2009, partially to give theatres more time to prepare for the 3D. Jim Giannopoulos, who was at the time the co-chairman at Fox Filmed Entertainment, said that he expected theatres would update their projectors to accommodate the 3D demands of the film, and he was right. Theatres everywhere wanted a slice of that sweet Smurfahontas revenue, and Avatar grossed over $77 million in its first week. Compare that to The Squeakquel, which grossed $75 million in total. It took 19 days for Avatar to gross $1 billion, and it eventually went on to become the highest grossing movie of all time in more than 30 markets across every continent, except Antarctica of course. But dang, if they had theaters, the movie probably would have dominated there too. Avatar didn't pull any punches when it came to marketing either. They put out a large Making of Avatar book, a fictional field guide to Pandora with entries written by botanist Jody Holt, a kid's scrapbook, and a large art book. A video game tie-in was also released for all the major consoles and sold about 2.7 million units. On top of that, they also released action figures, Coca-Cola rolled out bottles with VR Avatar promos on the label, postage stamps with the characters were announced. Man, those cats with human boobs were everywhere. What I believe Avatar has done as much as anything is it's opened up a small crack in the door to let other filmmakers know that stories that could not be told in the past can now be told, Landau said about the film's success. No longer do they reside in your imagination or only in the pages of great literature, but you now have the technology to realize them. People everywhere were thrilled to be a part of this landmark moment in film history, as evidenced by those box office numbers. Now, there's so much excitement about the new upcoming sequels. A few of the new cast members slated for the sequels are Kate Winslet, Eddie Falco, Vin Diesel and Michelle Yeoh. Worthington, Saldana, Giovanni Ribisi, Dilip Rao and CCH Pounder will all be reprising their roles in the sequels. Even Sigourney Weaver will be back, although she won't be playing Dr. Augustine because the character died in the first movie. It was revealed that Jake and Neytiri have had children, and these Na'vi youngsters will feature prominently in the first two sequels. Cameron described the films as separate stories to have an overall arc inclusive of the first film. The sequels will also incorporate crossovers with Walt Disney World's Pandora theme park. Specifically, monsters from the Flight of the Passage ride will likely appear in the sequels. It's also been speculated that the films could be screened in auto-stereoscopy or glasses-free 3D, though this is yet to be officially confirmed. Glasses or not, they will definitely be 3D in some form or another. The crew is still planning on pushing the boundaries with Avatar's sequels. Avatar 2 focuses more on the oceans of Pandora, and because of this, the film will feature multiple underwater scenes. The technology for underwater motion capture didn't exist yet, so once again the production team invented it themselves. The issue with the underwater motion capture, Cameron says, isn't so much about getting the actors and crew underwater, but the fact that water creates a moving mirror that distorts the dots and markers on mocap suits. To counteract this, the team has covered the surface of the water with tiny balls that prevent cameras and equipment from being reflected back in the water. Performance capture filming for both movies wrapped up in November of 2018, and as of this video, the crew is shooting the live-action sequences for both the first and second sequels in New Zealand. This time around, the sequels are expected to have a combined budget of over $1 billion. The release dates for the 4 sequels have been changed due to the pandemic and are now scheduled for release on December 16, 2022, December 20, 2024, December 18, 2026, and December 22, 2028. Of course, if Avatar 2 and 3 don't go well, there's a chance that 4 and 5 will be pulled, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens. Will moviegoers who have now experienced multiple CGI films, VR, and plenty of mocap video games still scramble to see Avatar in theaters? Can the sequels make the same amount of bank as the original? I think the answer will be a resounding yes, but I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. So leave a comment below letting me know how you think the Avatar sequels will turn out. With that having been said, that's all for today, folks. Don't forget to hit subscribe and click the notification icon to stay up to date on all my content. And if there's anything else you'd like to request, please don't hesitate to ask. As always, it's been a pleasure. Niyat here with Film Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.